Sometimes her silence doesn't begin with anger, frustration, or loss of interest. Sometimes it begins with something far subtler, the moment she senses you leaning too much on her for emotional reassurance. Women feel energetic shifts long before they speak them, and when a man starts moving from grounded presence to emotional dependence, she feels it like a tightening in the air. At first, she may respond normally, but over time, as your messages become more frequent, your desire for closeness becomes more urgent, or your tone starts showing insecurity, she pulls back. Not because she wants to hurt you, but because something inside her whispers that she's losing the version of you who once felt unshakable, balanced, and in control of his inner world. A woman becomes silent when she feels she's being asked to carry more emotional weight than she should, and emotional dependence is exactly that, a weight. It's a quiet pressure that grows between two people. It's the unspoken expectation that she must validate you, reassure you, give you attention so you feel secure. But the truth is that no one, not even someone who loves you deeply, wants to fill the role of emotional savior. When a man becomes dependent, he stops being the source of strength she was drawn to. He becomes someone reaching, grasping, hoping for connection instead of embodying it. And that shift, even when subtle, disrupts attraction. What most men don't realize is that a woman senses this long before they do. She feels when your texts carry a hidden question: do you still want me? Are you still interested? Am I enough? She notices when you respond too fast, when your mood swings based on her replies, when you start over-explaining your feelings or checking her energy like a mirror. She might not say anything at first, but she feels it. And when she feels it, she instinctively steps back. Her silence becomes the space she needs to breathe, to recalibrate, to figure out why the energy suddenly feels heavier than before. This is where many men make the situation worse. They sense her distance and respond with more pressure, more texts, more calls, more explanations, more emotional intensity. They panic because her silence feels like rejection. But in reality, her silence is often just a sign that the relationship needs balance again. When you push harder, you only confirm the very thing that made her retreat, that your emotional world is becoming dependent on her presence. The solution isn't to chase her, fix her silence, or try to talk your way out of it. The real solution is to return to yourself, to reclaim the grounded energy that attracted her in the first place. When she senses that your happiness, your mood, and your self-worth depend on her, she begins to feel responsible for your emotional state, and responsibility kills attraction. It replaces admiration with pressure, curiosity with predictability, excitement with obligation. The moment she senses you're no longer emotionally centered, she instinctively pulls away to see if you can stabilize yourself, if you can return to the man who doesn't need external validation to feel secure. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you stop needing her emotionally, she feels safe again. She feels the balance returning. She starts missing the version of you who stood tall, who had purpose, who had direction beyond her. A woman's silence often isn't punishment, it's a reaction. It's her instinct telling her to step back so she can see whether your strength is real or dependent on her attention. And the moment you reconnect with your emotional independence, the dynamic resets. Because a man grounded in himself is a man she can trust, respect, and feel drawn to again. That is why the beginning of her silence is often the first sign, not of loss, but of what needs to be rebuilt. When you begin to detach, something powerful happens inside you, something she can feel long before you ever say a word. Because a man who is emotionally centered, who is grounded, who is no longer chasing validation, sends a vibration into the world that is impossible to ignore. Your energy shifts, your presence shifts, the way you move, the way you speak, the way you breathe, it all changes. You stop reacting to her distance, her silence, her coldness. Instead, you start responding to your own inner needs, and that is where your strength begins. You see, when you were attached, when you were worried about losing her, you didn't realize how much power you were giving away. You didn't notice how your self-worth slowly started depending on her attention. Every message, every call, every small sign of affection became a form of approval you needed. And the moment she pulled away, you felt anxious, insecure, confused. But now that phase is over. You're no longer fueled by fear. You're fueled by purpose. The truth is, silence is not always punishment. It's feedback. It tells you where you stand. And when you stop chasing that feedback, when you stop trying to decode mixed signals, you create space. Space for peace. Space for clarity. Space for growth. And that space is exactly what she begins to notice. Because silence is no longer something you fear, it's something you master. You begin to understand what Stoics have always preached: control the inner world and the outer world loses its power over you. Your detachment is not coldness, it's not bitterness, it's not revenge. It's simply the understanding that your mental and emotional well-being come first. You no longer sit by the phone waiting, you no longer scroll through old messages, you no longer replay old conversations trying to find where everything went wrong. Instead, you invest your energy back into your goals, your discipline, your mission. And here's the secret: the moment a man becomes mission-oriented, he becomes magnetic. Women can feel when a man is drifting, not because he's losing interest, but because he's reclaiming himself. They feel that shift instantly. The energy that once poured into them now flows back into your life. And suddenly you're no longer predictable. You're no longer stuck in emotional dependency. You're becoming someone stronger, more grounded, more focused. And that shift creates a silence of its own, the silence of a man who has finally found inner peace. And that is when her mind begins to wander. Not because you forced it, not because you manipulated anything, but because your detachment created contrast. She remembers the version of you who chased, who worried, who overgave, who overexplained. But now she sees the version of you who is calm, focused, and unbothered. And curiosity turns into confusion. Confusion turns into concern. Concern turns into realization. And realization turns into the desire to reconnect. But your goal is not to trigger her reaction. Your goal is mastery over self. Because when you truly let go, not pretend, not fake, not halfway, but truly let go, you break the emotional chains that once controlled you. You begin living instead of waiting. You begin rising instead of doubting. You begin choosing yourself over the need to be chosen by someone else. And when she finally breaks that silence, whether with a message, a call, or a small attempt to reconnect, you'll no longer respond from desperation. You'll respond from strength. That's the power of detachment. That's the power of a man who reclaims his life. That's the power of becoming unbreakable. Only a man who lets go can finally move forward. There comes a moment in every man's journey where he realizes that chasing someone who isn't choosing him is the fastest way to lose himself. And when that realization hits you, something shifts inside. You begin to understand that emotional peace isn't found by controlling someone else's actions. It's found by controlling your reactions. And this is where Stoicism becomes your backbone, because the more you pull inward, the more you start to see how much of your energy was being drained by unnecessary expectations, overthinking. When you finally let go, not out of anger, but out of clarity, something powerful happens inside you. You stop trying to convince her, explain yourself, prove your value, or remind her of what you bring to the table. You simply release the emotional rope. And this release creates a quiet shift in the energy between you. Because as long as you were holding on, as long as you were reaching out, trying to keep the bond alive, she felt comfortable with the imbalance. She knew, even unconsciously, that you would be there, waiting, available. But the moment you let go, truly let go, she feels a void where your presence used to be. At first, she may not react. She might pretend she doesn't care, or that she's too busy, or that everything is exactly the same. But silence has a strange effect on people. It doesn't hit them all at once. It slowly builds. She starts to notice the absence of your me. Sages. Then she notices how the day feels slightly different without your check-ins. She begins to wonder what you're doing. And then she starts thinking, what she once took for granted, did I lose him? That thought alone is powerful because people rarely panic when they lose someone. They panic when they realize someone has stopped trying. But this wasn't a tactic. This wasn't manipulation. You let go because you needed peace. You let go because holding on was draining your mind, your confidence, and your internal balance. And that type of release carries a certain strength she can feel even if you don't say a word. When a man no longer seeks validation from someone who is withholding it, he becomes someone who validates himself. And that energy is magnetic. It's calm, unbothered, composed. It's the energy of a man who finally understands that his value isn't determined by who stays or who leaves. This shift in you forces a shift in her. She starts to reflect on the moments you were there, all the conversations you held up, all the emotional space you provided, all the attention she once shrugged off, and only when she feels the emptiness of your silence does she truly start to understand the weight of your presence. Because here's the truth, people cannot appreciate what they are never in danger of losing, and while she's processing the silence, you're evolving. You're no longer waiting for her to speak, you're growing in the silence she left behind, you're rebuilding the parts of you once ignored. You're reconnecting with your purpose, your mission, your inner world. And in doing so, you become stronger, more grounded, more aligned with the man you were meant to be. Your absence becomes a mirror for her, but your growth becomes a gift for you. Eventually, she feels it. The emotional distance, the detachment, the version of you that is no longer eye only chasing. And that's when she breaks the silence. Not because you forced it, not because you begged for it, but because your peace made enough noise to draw her back in. And whether she comes back as a memory or a lesson, you return to that moment with one realization. Letting go wasn't losing her. It was finding you again. And that is the power of letting go. And that is there comes a moment when your silence begins to transform you, not just in the way she perceives you, but in the way you perceive yourself. Many men think letting go is simply the act of stepping back, but real letting go is deeper than that. It requires rebuilding the parts of you that were weakened by overthinking, overgiving, and overinvesting. And this transformation is not loud. It's not something you announce. It's something that happens quietly as you shift your focus back onto yourself, back onto your mission, back onto the life that was waiting for you while you were stuck analyzing her every move. The truth is, your growth was never meant to happen in her presence. It was meant to happen in your own presence. When you stop chasing, you reclaim all the energy you once poured into hoping, waiting, and wondering, and that energy becomes fuel. Fuel for discipline, fuel for self-respect, fuel for progress. You start waking up with more clarity. You start engaging in things that build you rather than drain you. For the first time in a long time, your mind is not crowded with questions about how she feels or what she's thinking or why she hasn't replied. Instead, your mind becomes a space for your goals, your standards, your journey. And ironically, this internal shift becomes external. People start noticing it even if you say nothing. Your posture changes, your tone changes, your eyes change. You're no longer looking for validation. You're living in a way that validates you without needing anyone else. You become grounded, and that groundedness creates a sense of presence that others feel instantly, including her. Because here's the reality, people don't notice your absence, they notice your evolution. When she finally looks your way again, she won't see the man who was waiting for her message. She won't see the man whose emotions were tied to her responses. She will see a man whose world didn't stop because she became distant. She will see a man who chose himself when she chose silence. And that realization hits hard, because a man who can stand on his own is a man others gravitate toward. A man with a mission is a man who becomes a mystery, and a man who grows in silence is a man who becomes impossible to ignore, not because he tries to be, but because his growth speaks for him louder than any words ever could. Your transformation is not about making her chase you. It's about making yourself proud of the life you're creating. It's about realizing that the world is bigger than one person's attention. It's about understanding that peace comes from within, not from someone else's approval. And when you embody that energy, you naturally attract people who respect you, value you, and understand you. The ones who don't simply fade out of your story, and that's exactly how it should be. Growth isn't meant to be comfortable, it's meant to be worth it. And in this journey, you learn something important. Letting go wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a version of you stronger than the version she once knew and stronger than the version you ever believed you could be. And that is the real transformation she never saw coming. When you reach the stage where you've truly let go, where your mind is no longer consumed by anticipation or worry, something remarkable happens. Your presence becomes magnetic without effort. You stop reacting to every small action, to every silence, to every text. Instead, you act from a place of stability, from a place of self-possession, and that is profoundly attractive. People, especially her, feel the shift immediately. They sense the calm confidence that comes from a man who is no longer emotionally dependent on external validation, and it draws them in without you even trying. Letting go does not mean indifference. It does not mean abandoning care or shutting off connection. It means detachment in its purest form, freedom from the need to control, the need to predict, and the need to manipulate outcomes. When you detach, you stop chasing scenarios and start focusing on reality. You engage with the world as it is, not as you hope it to be. This clarity allows you to see situations objectively and act from wisdom rather than desperation. And that clarity is magnetic because it is rare. Most people act from desire, from fear, from lack. To act from presence, from groundedness, from self-possession is unusual, and that rarity commands attention. In this stage, patience becomes your strongest ally. You no longer demand immediate answers or reactions. You allow life to unfold, confident that your path is guided not by others' approval, but by your principles. Every action you take is deliberate, measured, and aligned with your values. You are no longer impulsive, you are intentional. And this intentionality is what signals strength, security, and authenticity, qualities that draw respect, admiration, and attraction naturally. Another profound aspect of true detachment is the empowerment it creates internally. You begin to realize that your happiness, your sense of worth, and your peace are entirely within your control. No one else has the power to take them away. You stop projecting expectations onto others and stop relying on their behavior to feel complete. This internal sovereignty changes everything. You walk with a different energy, a different aura. It is calm, composed, and unshakable. And when someone senses that energy, it creates curiosity, intrigue, and a quiet reverence. Ironically, this is when she begins to notice. It is not your words or your attempts to reach out that pull her in. It is the subtle shift in how you exist in the world. She sees that you are no longer reacting to her presence or absence. She sees that you are whole on your own. And that realization triggers her interest because it contrasts sharply with a man who used to be constantly available, constantly seeking approval, constantly dependent on her attention. The new version of you is untouchable by manipulation, unaffected by games, and unwavering in self-respect. This is irresistible. Ultimately, the lesson is profound. Letting go is not about losing control. It is about reclaiming it. It is about understanding that the power to create attraction, respect, and meaningful connection begins with yourself. When you master your inner world, when you are present, grounded, and detached, everything external aligns naturally. You are no longer chasing attention. Attention comes to you. You are no longer desperate for validation. Validation finds you. And in that space, real connections, deep, genuine, respectful, become inevitable. Detachment transforms you, and in that transformation, she can't help but respond, not because you forced it, but because your strength and presence demand acknowledgement.